Hi, so I'd like to talk today about the flat sixth. Now, adding the flat sixth or the sharp five to a major scale is possibly one of the most useful things you can do to enrich the harmony. Now, I'm not going to talk about the Barry-Harris scales today just because he derives it in a different way, but it's the same thing. The Barry-Harris major sixth diminished scale is an 8-note scale where you have a flat sixth or sharp five added to the normal scale. Right, and this is a harmonic note. So this is different from playing a bebop scale, like a C major bebop scale, where essentially that note is just filler, it doesn't have a harmonic function, it just moves from one note to the next. So I could play that note instead, and it'll have essentially the same function. It does sound a bit different, but rhythmically, the main purpose of that note in that context is to make the C6 chord tones pop out of the scale on the beat, right? Which is one thing. However, using it as a harmonic note is another. And the main reason to do that is it makes everything a bit richer, okay? So I'm just going to take this from a slightly different direction from the way Barry-Harris does, and I'm going to talk about two scales that you can find nested within the C major sixth diminished scale and how that can help us play changes, okay? So this is a little bit coming at it from an angle. If you want to find out the way that Barry teaches it, I can't think of a better place to go than the Things I Learned from Barry-Harris channel, which I'll link below, and all the stuff is very systematized and very clearly communicated. So that's a great place to go to check out more about Barry's teaching. This is my own little bit of a riff on it, but things that I've noticed before from transcribing. So one of the big things I noticed is that a lot of players of the 1930s, 40s, and later like to play things with the flat six in over, dominant chords. So I mean, that's no surprise really. What is the flat six? In this case, A flat in the key of C, say. If you add that to a flat to a G7 chord, you get a G7 flat 9. And this is the most obvious alteration perhaps, apart from maybe the flat, the flat 3, which gives you the 5-7 sharp 5 chord, which is very common in early jazz because it's a kind of bluesy sound. But this is probably the other most common type of altered dominant you are likely to come across in the sort of swing and bebop era and so on. And of course it also shows up in Western classical music. Now, if we flatten the sixth in the major scale, we get this thing which is known in, that thing is known in sort of, I suppose, chord scale theory, modern jazz education circles as a harmonic major. The scale did not exist in the understanding of the classical theorists. It's a jazz concept. It's kind of useful though. For instance, if I can play you a line from Night in Tunisia, if you listen to this, okay, it's from the B section transposed of Night in Tunisia. All of those notes belong to the C harmonic major scale. So the idea of a major scale with a flat six is inherently quite useful. And even though the scale itself kind of sounds a bit nondescript, at least to me, it's very hard for me to not hear this. To hear an E instead of an E flat. And I think actually a lot of lines might have been conceived of, that we think perhaps of as being harmonic major, be conceived of as being harmonic minor attached to harmonic major, so with an E and an E flat instead of an E, for instance, but then maybe resolving to a major chord. It's hard to say. But this concept is interesting mostly because of the harmonies it allows us to pull out. So in a C major chord scale, I could play C major 7th, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7th, B half diminished, and C major, like that, right? So those are very vanilla sounds, we're very used to those. But if I then flatten the 6th in the scale, the C major and the E minor 7th remain the same, but everything else changes. Nice, huh? And some of these sounds you might recognise from the Barry-Harris examples. And it's G7 again, that remains the same. But then this lovely chord Okay, so that is A flat major 7 sharp 5. And a diminished 7th. So, we're in a position to combine these with the regular major sounds as much as we like. And the obvious place to do that would be in a 2-5-1. So perhaps we could take an ordinary D minor 7th, go into G7, and then C major, right? That sort of thing, right? Now, we could start with a D minor 7 flat 5, G7, C major. And the difference between two things would be, in the first example, we start off with more of a major tonality, and then maybe in the second example, we'd use that flat 6 earlier. But in practice, I'm just going to play shell voicings to leave it a bit more open, right? So, and then I'll demonstrate some different versions of what we can do. So, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so first thing we can obviously do is just play the arpeggios. So if I play, for instance, that's just D minor, G7, C major. It's very, very simple. Now if I do something different, if I go D minor and then I go to B diminished 7th, for instance, which is a chord from the harmonic major, you can hear the difference, right? Very, very common sound in bebop, right? But how about I also maybe use the F minor major 7th sound, which is like this. Now that's a sound that Charlie Christian uses actually quite a lot. Do it on Rose Room solo, for instance. Also Lester Young, Charlie Parker, all sorts of people. Okay, so if I was just to do the whole thing as harmonic major, sorry, I could start off with an F minor major 7th, for instance, and then move to a B diminished, then resolve with C major, like this. So this sort of thing. And I'd say, like, it's good to keep it loose. You know, again, the good reason to play shell voicings is you're not bossing around the solos too much. They can decide what kind of 6th they want in their key, or what kind of 5th they want on their 2 minor chord. Okay, so that is, I think, pretty useful. Now, a rather nice thing that's hidden in our harmonic major scale is this chord here. Now, this is a G13 flat 9. And in it we have an E major. Now we don't think of that being in the scale normally, because when we're constructing everything from the ground up, we don't think about what other scales we could create if we just moved over that note by a half step. But actually, we can turn it into a E7. It's kind of useful. Like that, right? Okay? And we can take that, make it D minor 11th if we wanted to. Same way. Well, that's G7, right? We already have that, okay? So if I do that, if I then play the E major, perhaps on the G13, the G7 sound, this will sound like this. Well, that belongs to the harmonic major. Okay? Which is to say, the major scale with a flat 6. So that's useful. Now, we can now in fact look at the alternative approach, which is like sometimes we get chord progressions, very commonly in jazz actually, that go 4 major, 4 minor, 1. So for instance, in the last few bars of All of Me, you get that, right? Which is F major, F minor, C major, or F major 7th, F minor 6th, or F minor major 7th, C major, okay? So the idea would be then that you could play what you play on a 2-5-1, D minor, G7, C major on that. and it works. So this is where it gets useful, because we're now uniting two disparate chord progressions. Let me just play this for you. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 2, 2, 5, 1. Particularly I was using a B full diminished chord over the F minor chord. Try F minor. Okay, right? Or we could use D minor. Let's try D minor. Since the first chord is F major, actually D minor is probably a better choice. But you can hear that doesn't really matter too much. A flat 6 is kind of the important part of that chord progression. Now that F minor is also related to B flat 7, so we also can play the backdoor progression using a 2, 5, 1. Let's have a quick listen to that. 1, 2, sorry, let me just clear that first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Have a listen to this. E major there, right? We play A minor going to E major. And all those ideas work really well. So I think this is huge because it unites a couple of very disparate, or what were to my mind disparate things. 4, 4 minor, 1. Half diminished or minor 7, 5, 7, flat 9, 1. And the back door, F major or F minor, going to B flat 7, going to C major, right? 1 is C major. And that's 3 separate situations that are now the same thing. But it goes further. Because actually, that E major that we have here is a great way to A minor. I can find an A minor 7th sound, of course, in C major. So by bringing these two scales together, we get that. But also, we could also think of the flat 6 as being a sharp 5, in which case we get this scale, which is the harmonic minor, a harmonic minor in this case. So again, now that opens this world up. B minor 7 flat 5, going to E7, going to A minor, right? Why is that important? Well, there's lots of tunes that start in major and then go to relative minor real quick. So for instance, Blues for Alice or Confirmation, or There Will Never Be Another You, or Georgia. Okay? So those kinds of songs, like the go to relative minor, are actually, if we think about it from the flat 6 sharp 5 perspective, just an embellishment of the central key. Okay? So I'll just do that for you very quickly. I'll just play the minor 2, 5, 1 in A minor, so B minor 7 flat 5, E7, A minor, like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to play everything I've done so far on top of it. So let's start with the major 2, 5, 1, D minor 7, G7 flat 9, C major. Like this. Okay, now I'm going to play F major, F minor, C major. Again. Now you notice I use the F melodic minor there, which gives you the altered scale, right? Do it again. F major. Okay, very good sound. Let's do the back door. So we're going to go B flat 7, F minor, B flat 7, and C major. Okay, and because of the B flat 7, that gives us a very altered sound going over the A minor, because again it's related to the F melodic minor, which is the same thing as E altered. Okay, very beboppy sound. Now, so that's something we can do, and it's very good, and it works very well. I can also use the major options as well, so I can play the D minor, going to D minor 7 flat 5, which I kind of did with the F major. Like that, right? So that's really useful. Okay, and again we can do the swap around. So if I play that on a, let's do F major, F minor, C major, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. So I'm going to play it as if it was a A minor 2, 5, 1. Cool, huh? Notice that suddenly becomes very hip, because if I choose to use this sort of minor language, this is using a 3 ending in minor, as Barry Harris would call it. That's basically an E triad, right? The E triad over the C major gives you a very hip major 7 sharp 5 sound, which you can also, by the way, find in the C harmonic major. Okay, so that E triad is quite powerful, you know? Okay, so there's other things you can pull from this, but I just want to demonstrate the sort of richness that you get from these flat 6, sharp 5 sort of alterations, and therefore these sounds that you can get in the the major 6th diminished scale, as Barry calls it. So, you know, this kind of, but these sounds as well, you know, kinds of tonalities. This is a beautiful one that gets used a lot in gypsy jazz. This is a G13 chord with an A flat in the bass instead of a G. So there's not even really a good name. Most people write it down as G13 flat 9, but you know, obviously the flat 9 is in the bass. So it could also be thought of as a kind of variant of a diminished chord. You see that a lot, you know. And Django actually uses a harmonic major scale to solo over it. So, you know, I mean, the flat 6 sound. So there's you know, that is something perhaps to think about, and I think sometimes we can call the same thing different names, but I think the power of Barry's approach, as opposed to just having 2 separate scales, is to recognise that the sharp 5, flat 6 thing are very closely linked, and that allows you to simplify all kinds of chord progressions. You know, I've got to the point now, perhaps, where you can basically play a 2-5-1 over everything, which would be nice, because we tend to be better at 2-5-1s, you know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please post any thoughts you have below.